Hello, welcome to the Africa Briefing podcast, where we discuss everything African.
Hello, and welcome to the Africa Briefing podcast. My name is John Ofeyansa. Seek ye first the political kingdom, and all these things shall be added unto you. This was one of the favorite mantras of Kwame Nkrumah, arguably the greatest African politician of the 20th century. But the question is, after more than 6 decades, what has been added to Africa's political independence? Most African countries attained independence around the same time as Malaysia, South Korea, and Thailand. And the sad irony is that the gross national product of those Southeast Asian countries were much lower than those of Ghana, for instance, at the time of independence. Today, all those countries are dubbed Asian tigers for their rapid economic development, whereas African leaders are always begging, bowl in hand, for economic and financial assistance from the West and currently China. Africa's relatively woeful state of affairs can be attributed to a number of factors, some self-inflicted, and in other cases, external. Let's take the case of the 8 West African countries that use the CFA Franc, the currency that was created in 1945 by France for its African colonies. Most, if not all, of these countries gained independence in 1960, but have until this year been compelled by France to keep the CFA Franc. The currency's value was originally pegged to the French franc, which was subsumed into the euro after France became a member of the Eurozone. The CFA franc has since been pegged to the euro and underpinned by France. This requires that the Francophone countries keep 50% of their foreign exchange reserves with the French treasury. This is one of the reasons the CFA franc has been criticized as exploitative. Pegging the CFA franc first to the French franc and later the euro has actually delivered some benefits for the Francophone states. For one, relative to other African countries, the CFA franc zone member states have had very low inflation and a stable currency, which was devalued once in 1994. But critics of the CFA franc point to France's right of veto as one that deprives the West African states of their monetary sovereignty. They also argue that the current deal sees African countries channel more money to France than they receive in aid. In addition, the individual African countries have no say in deciding key monetary policies that affect their people, as these are determined by European countries as part of the European Union. This foreign control over decisions that should be made on an African level is detrimental to the economic growth of the region. Eurozone monetary policy has an anti-inflation bias that does not ideally cater for the reality in African countries. The CFA franc is also considered by some to be a barrier to industrialization and economic development, and does not stimulate trade integration between fellow Francophone nations or allow banks to provide adequate credit for their economies. Monetary sovereignty refers primarily to 3 rights, including the right to issue currency, that is legal tender within its territory, the right to determine and change the value of that currency, and the right to regulate the use of that currency or any other currency within its territory. Therefore, the decision by the 8 countries led by Cote d'Ivoire to jettison the CFA in favor of a new regional currency, the ECO, is welcome as an assertion of their sovereignty. France formally accepted the move this month after a bill was ratified by the Council of Ministers in Paris. The introduction of the ECO will diminish France's influence in the monetary union. France will no longer have the representation on the monetary union board. CFA Franc countries will also no longer be required to keep half of their foreign exchange reserves with the French treasury. France maintains, however, that it will continue to support the peg of the ECO to the euro. Should countries using the ECO not be able to pay for their imports, France will cover these payments. The catch, though, is that such an event will trigger France's return to the Monetary Policy Committee, invoking suspicion that perhaps France wants to hijack the whole process to extend its control over the whole region. Therefore, the leaders of the region must be vigilant and muster the political will to resist any such move by France. Thank you for listening, and keep safe and keep hope alive. And for credible source of news and information, comment, analysis on Africa, please visit www.africabriefing.org.
You have been listening to the Africa Briefing podcast.